What's up, Liron here. In this video we'll talk about how to paint small, and I'm gonna demonstrate using this small scene, cute little boat scene, and I'm gonna talk about what's important to focus on when painting small. I love to do this kind of thing because it allows you to focus on the more high-level stuff. Composition, color, harmony, and not necessarily to get too caught up in the small details and the technique, because it makes everything simpler. Now, one of the main key takeaways from this one is you need to have one strong focal point, because you don't have enough room to put in too much information. So there has to be one strong focal point, possibly another one or two, but one has to be really clear and strong. So with that being said, let's get started. So the secret, I think, to painting this small a size is to actually have one main focal point to focus on. You can have secondary ones like in larger pieces, but I think here you have to have a strong one to support the whole thing. That has to be interesting enough and prominent enough. So this is what I'm doing right now. And one reason why I love painting this small a size is, first, it's very fast and I love speed. And second, it forces you to learn how to focus on the main thing, the main details, what really matters, the overall composition. It just forces you to get rid of anything that's secondary, because it's very easy to get bogged down in the superficial details, things that aren't as important. So for me now, I'm just placing in the boat, and the main thing I care about is actually the highlights, because that's what I'm going to preserve after this first wash. The scene it's not heavily lit, so I want to preserve that feeling of darkness and perhaps even some moodiness to it. And this is why the light and shadow conditions are going to be fairly gray. I don't want too much information. I actually will get rid of the boat here. I don't care about it at all, but I am going to place this secondary focal point of a boat here just to help our head travel into the distance, okay? And this mast is incredibly important in connecting this boat with the horizon line, with the mountain ridge in the background. I could add a very small, even minor focal point here in the background. Okay, this mast is going to play a key role again in cutting through that horizon line and a bunch of other details and riggings and all of that. There's this wire going into the back here, so that's important. A couple of ropes through here. And that's pretty much everything we'll need. Now, if you look at it really up close, there's nothing there, and that's important. If you can get to a point where you can dumb down the scene to this level of simplicity, you have a good shot at producing a beautiful painting. And of course, everything I'm saying is just a recommendation from my own experience. You may have your own way of doing things that works really well for you, so if you do, stick to it. Now I'm going to rearrange some stuff and then we'll get to painting this. So I'm going to keep this one very simple color scheme, simple drawing, simple everything. I'm basically using French ultramarine, some cadmium yellow, and a bit of both Quinacridone Rose and Pyrrole Scarlet. As you can see, the cadmium is very opaque. It really takes over this mix. Now what I want to do, funny enough, is mix kind of a gray combination of colors, see where that gets me, or very muted blue. Because what I want to do is have an initial wash that really sets the tone for the entire scene and sets it up as something that's fairly muted and dim. And I believe this scene is from the UK, and I'm starting to take some interest in these overcast scenes. Okay, so now I have a good mix of kind of muted blue, perhaps a bit on the green side, that's fine. And I'm just starting to cover everything up. I'm starting with a bit more blue. And this really goes to show you how, in many cases, it is the atmosphere that takes over, and you don't really have to worry all that much about, how shall I call it, that the actual local colors, you know, what's really the color of an object in the scene is really secondary. Now the only thing I care about really at this point is the highlight, so I'm gonna paint around these boats and leave myself the option of adding some highlights with the boats in the further distance. For this boat, I actually know what the highlights are gonna be. So let's now actually blue it up as we get closer. I don't know why, but I want to try and reverse what I'm usually doing. This side of the boat is completely in the shadow, not a very dark shadow, but a shadow indeed. Then here, negative paint around this light shape. This is all kind of blue, so let's add a bit more blue of a mix here at the side and just start bluing this side of the boat up. I don't need a highlight here, I'm gonna get rid of that. And then I'm gonna keep a couple of highlights around here. And notice how already we get a very nice sense of light and shadow. Now here I'm gonna do something interesting. I'm gonna paint around, there's a highlight in the reflection. I'm gonna paint around that, and you'll see what's about to happen. Painting around that highlight, and then I'm gonna add some, I could leave it as is, or I could add some yellow to it, and you know what? I think I'm gonna leave it as is. I think I'm gonna leave it lighter. Now I wanna grab a bit of a stronger mix here, and start mixing in some wet in wet, either ripples in the water, but also just to darken it up a bit as it gets closer to us, okay? Now this part we don't need, and I'm just adding a couple of small gentle ripples, okay? This may be a little too much, so I'm getting rid of some of the water on the paper towel and just getting rid of that. And now let's let it rest for a few moments, dry, and we can continue working on it. So now everything is dry and it's time to move it along with the second wash. Let's talk about strategy. It's going to be very simple. I'm going to put in a very light background. Now, funny enough, because all of this is very green, I'll actually have this gray but more towards the red, and that'll feel even grayer, and we'll send it to the background. That's first. Second, the water is slightly darker than the sky, but I'm actually going to cut myself some slack here and leave it as is, and only focus on the reflections and shadows on the boats themselves, okay? So we'll get started, and starting from this very same mixture, I'm going to add a little more red this time, a little more blue. Let's test it out, see what it looks like. This is really good for us. So it's a gray with a bias towards the red, and I'm just gonna start placing in the background. And again, the beauty with these smaller paintings is that, and I'm gonna leave a highlight here because it's simple and I can do it, so I don't have to add too much, white gel pen. But the I forgot even what I was gonna say, but the beauty is that the technique becomes simpler because it's a smaller piece of paper. Technique gets much simpler. And oh yeah, the beauty is that you don't really need any details to make it work. And I like that kind of thing because it really does teach you on how to work in a simple manner. You could add more or less complexity as you see fit. For example, I could make this mountain ridge in the background a little more complex, add some more details to it, or kind of leave it very simplified, okay? I could also blend some edges. So let's do that. In fact, let's go over the edge that's still kind of wet, and let's just get rid of some of that by cleaning the brush, wiping it on the towel, and touching the edge. So here we got a bit of a nice fade in. Now there's a cliff or kind of a part of the beach that comes into the ocean. I don't even care about that. I'm gonna start working on the shadows for these small boats, and let's switch to a smaller brush to get these in. I'm gonna need a bit more control. So I'm going to start with the farther one. That actually has a highlight, but I didn't leave it, so I'm going to ignore it. It's a touch darker than the water. Now remember, we're glazing, and because of that, just by adding a very thin layer, we're already going to darken it. So we don't need much. Okay, so this is done. We can add that highlight later on with a white pen, as I mentioned. And let's add just a bit of a detail to the top of the boat. Let's actually block this off completely. Next up we have this boat. So for this one, I'm gonna go with what I see actually, and let's warm it up a little. A hint of yellow and red, maybe make it a little orange, but a very muted orange at that. A bit more red. And let's just put it in very simply and do as we see actually in the reference photo, which is leave those white highlights to the right, okay? So it gradually moves from color to white of the paper. So I'm gonna just grab a little less of the paint mix, and that's a nice little effect here. Let's add a bit of blue just to contrast some of the colors we see in, so kind of like that. Maybe drop a bit of blue here at the bottom, and perhaps darken this left edge a bit more with that same blue. And then add a very, there's barely any reflection, so I'm just gonna blend that bottom part into the water. You don't need to make up too much of the things you don't see, but I will use this opportunity because we're doing this one we're gonna be done in almost really 2 layers. So I'm gonna put in everything, all the details I see. So for example, we have this rope here that goes into the water. Okay, a bit thick, but it will work. We can also put in the mast already, so let's do that. Masts can be a challenge to get this line straight and look good, but we'll give it a go. And again, I'm kind of breaking my rules and working on everything in one go, because sometimes I like to do that. And maybe a bit of details here, some of the ropes, like that. And we established a boat in the distance. Now let's move on towards our main boat, and I have a lot of red here from the palette. Let's switch back to this brush now, still small. And I'm gonna get me a bunch of blue here. And the shadowy area of this boat should be, as you can see here, a bit darker than the water. And that's what I'm gonna strive for. I'm gonna blue it up some more. Just wanted to add a bit of every primary color. So a bit more blue. I want it to be more towards the purple side. And I'm just gonna get started. I don't know exactly what I'll get, and I don't know how good it will look until I really put it to paper sometimes. So I'm just trying to put it in one go, as simple as I can, and hopefully get what I want. Okay, now remember again, if it's too dark, and I talked about this in several of my recent videos, you can just add more water and water it down. Okay, that really works out well. But you want to make sure you get the shape right. So here I go with some very loose details like that, and that'll just hint at whatever is in here. But I want to make sure I get the shape, especially in the bottom right. Okay, so I'm gonna go over this area. While it's still wet, I'm gonna use, perhaps, let's use the same brush to inject a bit of red onto the top here. See? And that really shows, because I'm using a very thick paint, and it will look really good. And then near the bottom, I have to darken it up even more with purple. So I'm gonna add a bit of purple like that. And then I have to pay attention to the shape underneath. So we have these two parts of the boat that, for the love of me, I cannot know what they're named, so you let me know in the comments down below. But here we go, connect it with the bottom, and here it's just a matter of putting in random patterns to convey the reflection. Okay, that's not always easy, so do your best, get that crisscross shape in, and whatever you get is good, really. Don't worry about it too much. It takes a lot of experience with the brush to get it right, and you won't get it right the first time, really. So I'm just putting in some of these random patterns, playing around with the mix as I feel it needs different paints here and there, and move it all the way to the front here. We're pretty much done. I do see this dark line running across this shape. Maybe there's an extra detail here. Actually, okay, so let's conclude for now what we've done. I'm actually gonna zoom in a bit. So you see, up until this point, we worked on the main shapes for most of the time. But here comes the part where we just add some final details, final touches. This is already a part of this stage, just final touches. I'm gonna add a bit of red here to the reflection, to reflect what I have up top. But this is just the finishing touches, small details that make it look a little better, but are not the thing that's responsible for it being beautiful. It's already beautiful. Now, you have to remember the main shapes are what makes a painting beautiful. But now we're just putting in some final touches to have some movement, some more detail. So I'm gonna add these two ropes in. You have to put these fast and in one go if you want them to look good. I kind of messed up mine, but here we go. Just two ropes like that. We have another rope coming in through here. I'm gonna add another imaginary one that doesn't exist through here, and you'll see why in just a moment. I'm gonna add these ropes reflections very lightly, like so. This one as well, strong here, and then it gets weaker, and this one as well, okay? Now we have the mast and all of those details. Again, be careful with these straight lines, but you cannot guarantee to get them the first time around. That's fine. If you have to practice this. I'm gonna put in some of that cadmium pure onto these details because I think it looks great. Let's get a bit more of that pure paint. I'm not scared to try things out, and I think that's been a big factor in me improving fast initially. Now I don't know, maybe I slowed down a bit, but in the beginning I felt like I'm improving really fast, and I think a lot of it had to do with how I'm not afraid to try out new things and see what happens. So let's do this mini mask. I don't know exactly what it is, but some ropes. Just trying to add some interest to it, some random details here and there. Let's add a shadow for the mask at the back. I just have to make sure that I make it blurry enough, kind of like this, so it doesn't take up too much and doesn't have too much information in it. Now let's add a bit of a dark shadow up top of this boat, actually, like so. I feel like it needs it. And a bit at the bottom, bit of shadow underneath here, and we're pretty much done. Now, if you want to add one final touch, I'm gonna get my white gel pen. We're gonna add a highlight here. I want to add it because I feel like it will have a nice little touch there and create a nice sense of light. There's a bit of a highlight here. There is kind of a highlight thing going on here. This has to be lighter to cut through the mountains, or the, sorry, not mountains, but just that part in the detail in the background. Now here I have this rope, so in the shadow I'm making it lighter, and you see what a beautiful effect it is. Now it's too much now, so I'm just gonna blend back some of it using a normal paper towel, or if it doesn't blend perfectly, what you can do is get a bit of water and just kind of wet it, and it will fade, but I don't want to wet it with something that'll smear it. That was not as graceful as I wanted it to be, so here we go. We just got rid of some of it. Okay, what else? What else? I don't want to overdo it really, and there isn't a lot to add here, but I could make some of these a little wider. And I think with that, we are done with this one. I could add, sometimes I like to, as a final touch, you see there's a writing here. I could hint at it, kind of like that. And I think this is done. Again, this is how you approach a very small piece of paper. As you can see here, it's the length of my finger, kind of. And what this means is we have to have one major focal point, and we can't get into too many details basically anywhere. You have to keep it very, very simple. Now with that, I was just talking about keeping it simple. I do think this background here could benefit from just a bit of darkening near the bottom and not overworking anything, just going over it with a bit of a darker touch, just to feel like there's a place that connects with the water. Here I don't do that because here it kind of fades into the distance. But in any case, this is it. I hope it's clear, and now let's wrap it up. So thank you so much for watching. As you've seen, I shared with you my thoughts and my decision-making process. A lot of things could have been done differently and would have worked in multiple different ways. So I want you to not get too crippled up by choices. Just go for what you want to try out and see how it goes. Get the feedback, and that way you'll learn best. On that same note, my frustration-free watercolor course is going to be out really soon. I'm just working on the final touches, editing the videos, creating the pages. It's going to be out very soon, and I'm really excited to share it with you. I think it's probably my best kind of product so far. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to drop a like, and also comment down below, let me know your thoughts, and subscribe if you still haven't. I have tons of tutorials just like this one. So I will see you again in the next vid real soon.